Baseball is a president tossing out the first ball of the season and a pudgy schoolboy playing catch with his dad on a Mississippi farm. A tall, thin old man waving a scorecard from the corner of his dugout. That's baseball. So is a big fat guy with a bulbous nose running home one of his 714 home runs.
We have a big 3-2 pitch coming here from Eckersley. Gibson swings and a fly ball to deep right field. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable! A home run for Gibson. And the Dodgers have won the game 5-4. I don't believe what I just saw. I don't believe what I just saw.
There's a man in Mobile who remembers that Honus Wagner hit a triple in Pittsburgh 46 years ago. That's baseball. And so is a scout reporting that a 16-year-old Sandlot pitcher in Cheyenne is a coming Walter Johnson. Baseball is a spirited race of man against man, reflex against reflex, a game of inches. Every skill is measured, every heroic, every failing, seen and cheered or booed, and then becomes a statistic. In baseball, democracy shines its clearest. The only race that matters is a race of the bag. The creed is a rule book, and color, merely something to distinguish one team's uniform from another.
Opening day was like Easter, like the 4th of July, and like Christmas. Easter because a lot of people would come to church, just like come to the ballpark and never show up again during the season. 4th of July because we always had fireworks of sort, and Christmas because we're getting a new present to open every spring and see what's in store for us throughout the season.
First of all, the thing that I love about baseball is the tempo. There's a game every day. You know, if you lose 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 in a row, you know tomorrow you're going to win. You may not, but you know that you're going to win tomorrow. We've got 162 games, and in our case, almost 200 games to do because we do every exhibition game as well as 162 regular season games.
It's not like the other sports. It's not a hyper game. Very few guys sweat during baseball beside the pitcher and the catcher. Mostly it's standing around. And you get up once every hour or so and you hit, and then you go sit down for a while. There's a relaxed nature about baseball. Not that it's a laid-back game. It's very intense out there.
That's why I think baseball is a great game to watch if you're a fan, because you can actually go out to a ballpark and sit there and watch the game and actually carry on a conversation between pitches, you know, with whoever you're there watching the game with.
There's some, what I would call, subtle violence in the game. When you think about a pitcher throwing a ball 95 miles an hour toward a batter, and sometimes the batter gets drilled by the ball, and God forbid he doesn't get hit up around the head or the face, but that's a scary thing. Guys colliding on the bases, a guy trying to score. There's a lot of subterranean or subtle violence in a ball game. Or how about a guy swinging his bat and hitting a ball 400 feet? There's an awful lot of menace behind a swing in order to propel a ball 400 feet. So baseball is a complicated game.
And the fact that everybody's played it, I think, means a lot to America because they can appreciate the role of the player. Whereas in basketball, you got to be 6'6". In football, you got to weigh 300 pounds. In the baseball, most anybody can play. Men and women have played as youngsters, and they all appreciate the in and outs of the game. And I think everybody has sort of a feeling that he or she would like to be a major league ball player.
And plus the romance, plus the history of the game. You know, there's no other game like baseball. It is, to use an old cliche, the great American game. There's little doubt about it. I mean, it was born during the Civil War, 1876. It became a professional sport, the Cincinnati Redlegs, and it's gone from there. It's survived strikes. It's survived wars. It's a game of survival.
And it's really a part of America. It's part of our country. We've grown up with baseball. Baseball grew up with the country and vice versa. And it's just a thing that permeates our whole society. And it doesn't have any creed or color. Everybody can be interested in baseball. Another great thing, you can argue about baseball and not be a liberal or conservative or Democrat or Republican, and you can say anything pretty much and get by with it. You can say, well, I love, I love Willie Mays. Another guy said, no, I didn't like him. I liked Jackie Robinson, or I liked Barry Bonds, or I didn't like Barry, or I liked George Brett, or I love Ted Williams.
It's also a game of failure. I mean, you get a hit 3 out of 10 times, you're going to be a multimillionaire.
It would be the ultimate to be able to make a living playing sports, and I think the next best thing is to be a play-by-play man.
Well, even take me out to the ball game sounds better on a day like this. What a glorious, glorious day here on this Sunday afternoon as we go to the bottom half.
If a broadcaster comes into a region and stays on the air there 5, 6 years, and he becomes more or less a part of the family. They take him to the picnics, and he's around the kitchen, and he's in the automobile, and they can hardly get away from the guy, and he really becomes a conduit between the team and the public. The writers do that to some extent, but radio is a lot more day by day and night by night for 162 games, plus whatever happens in the World Series or spring training. So you're pretty much in their face all the time. And I think all of us in the baseball broadcasting profession have appreciated that, because most of the guys who do baseball have a passion for the game. They really love it, and they don't want to say this, but they'd probably do it without a salary. It's just part of being a baseball broadcaster.
My name is Pat Hughes, the radio voice of the Chicago Cubs. In 2006, this will be my 11th year with the Cubs and my 24th year in the big leagues.
At Wrigley Field, our attendance is always so great. We've almost sold 40,000 tickets for every single game. It's not only a beautiful place with the ivy on the walls and the green grass and kind of the skyline behind the ballpark and Lake Michigan, a beautiful dark shade of blue today. But what really makes Wrigley Field special are the people here, the fans. Once the game starts, this place will be full of people, and if the Cubs do something well, the sound will be overwhelming if you're not used to it. So it's the fans and the people that make Wrigley Field really a special place.
The Giants of the early 1960s were blessed with many Hall of Famers. They had Willie Mays, one of the all-time greats, Willie McCovey, Cepeda, Juan Marichal, Gaylord Perry. So it was easy to fall in love with baseball as a young fan growing up in the Bay Area in the late 50s and early 60s. I think, like most kids, I grew up wanting to be a ball player. I wanted to be either an NBA basketball player or a football quarterback in the NFL or the shortstop for the Giants. But at the age of about 15 or 16, I realized that I was not going to have enough ability to play in the big leagues, so I thought the next best thing would be to become a play-by-play man.
He takes off his cap. He mops his brow. He looks in and gets the side. He starts the windup. Here's the pitch, and it's a strike.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to Oriole Park at Camden Yards. We hope that you have a wonderful time this evening.
Hello, how are you? Welcome to Boots. Feel okay tonight? Yep. Program right here.
I also remind you that Oriole fans have an
Best
outstanding
Oriole program right here.
for being the best fans in baseball. And we
Program right here.
uphold that reputation by being courteous to a fan sitting near you. For the comfort of all of our fans.
My name is Joe Angel, play-by-play broadcaster at the moment for the Baltimore Orioles, and hopefully for the rest of my career.
Program right here. Come on, Oriole fans, over here. Program right here.
I was born in South America. My parents brought me to this country when I was 8 years old. We lived in Chicago, grew up in Chicago, went to high school in Chicago. I did not speak any English until I was about 10 years old. The only game I knew about until I was 10 was actually soccer in South America. So I discovered baseball at the age of 10 and fell totally in love with it. And from day one, I think I was destined to be in the game. That's how I feel about the game. And to be able to do something that you really love doing, to be able to go to work and not consider it work.
Baltimore won. The Red Sox coming up on the WEEI Red Sox Radio Network. Well, I remember the first spring training game was at Lakeland, Florida against the Tigers. And spring training games sort of fade because they don't count. But I do remember opening day when the Red Sox played Toronto and Dennis Eckersley started against Dave Steve. And I remember Rance Mullinick hitting the home run, and Toronto won something like 7-1. It was a rather one-sided game. But I remember a lot more the last game of the 04 season.
Hey, Red Sox Nation, let's do it again.
We have many who listen to us throughout New England, now on the internet, Red Sox fans, fans who just happen to like the broadcast, but Red Sox fans are everywhere. We are America's team, we like to think, because if you go to our ball games in Oakland or Tampa Bay, our fans oftentimes outnumber the home team fans. You see the enthusiasm and the love that you had for the game that can be generated back to the kids. To talk baseball with the great fans in New England. People love to talk baseball.
Oh, she nice.
Thank you, Miss Pesky.
Johnny.
Thank you, Johnny.
Anybody that calls me mister, I don't sign. You're in the ballpark, it should be a first name.
A long time ago, I was an athlete. Actually, I was headed to play football in college, and then decided to get married, and had some nice bonus money offered my way. So I decided to go into baseball, and went with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I was fortunate enough to play with some great players over there. Came up through the organization, and got traded to the Tigers in 1967 as a young kid, and I'd just been minor league player of the year and so forth. And the Tigers have been after me for a couple of years, so I was fortunate enough to come over here and play with some of the best teams in Tiger history. So it was really a thrill for me. There's nothing like going through something, whether your father owns a manufacturing business, and if he says, hey son, you're going to be the president, without working your way up through the manufacturing business and not knowing what goes out and what time you turn the lights off and turn them on and so forth, you're really not going to, probably won't do a very good job. So for me, I played sports all my life. I was fortunate enough to play football, basketball, and baseball, and had a lot of opportunities to do things, and I chose the baseball, and it's been very good for me. And the idea of going through the ups and downs, which if you get your stat sheet, there's no ups and downs on the stat sheets. You have to be out there in the field and win, lose, draw, cry, get beat up, sometimes beat up the other team, and those are the school of hard knocks that really give you an insight that you can't teach. You really have to go through it. I was very fortunate to play in the big leagues. And no matter where I was or what part of the city or the state or where I was, if somebody wanted to talk to me about the ball game, I would talk to them. Somebody wanted my autograph. I was thrilled that they wanted my autograph. And I would stand and talk to people. I remember my wife saying one time, we were out shopping for groceries, and I stood and talked to a couple for a half hour. She said, what are you doing? You're making us late. I said, listen, dear, these people are great fans, and I'm honored that they wanted to talk to me about things. So I've always felt that way, that I'm just an ordinary guy who happened to play baseball and happened to be a broadcaster, and that's really how I look at it.
The 0-1 pitch on the way, and it's down low, and it gets away from the catcher, Vance Wilson, over toward the first base dugout, and easily on the wild pitch. I had been in Seattle passing through doing UCLA football, UCLA basketball, and things like that, but I'd never spent any time. I was always here in Seattle and over to Pullman, or start in Pullman at Washington State and then come back to Seattle for the University of Washington, but I'd never spent any time up here at all. The way they have this place manicured, there's none better. Here's the 1-0 pitch on the way, swinging a ground ball hit right to first base. It's smothered there by Sexton, and a little late getting over there was the pitcher. But the biggest influence on my life, and this was the days before television. It wasn't really the days before television, but just the beginning of television. So we didn't have a television set. So I always listened to Harry Carey on KMOX in St. Louis. Like a lot of people. A lot of people will say what an influence he had on their lives.
Harry?
Hello?
This is Ronald Reagan.
Well, Mr. President, well, what a pleasant surprise.
Well, listen, I'm just joining all your other fans across the country and welcoming you back on the air today.
Well, that's awfully nice. I don't know what to say. I certainly appreciate it, sir.
Well, I know it's Harry Carey Day in the Chicago area, and it's great to have you back. You've had a lot of big-name celebrities fill in during your recovery, but there's no substitute for the real thing.
Well, you're awfully nice. Thank you so much, sir.
I listened to Harry Carey all the time from KMOX, and I would sit out on the porch with my dad with some roasting ears of corn and some iced tea and rock back and forth and listen to the Katydids at night and listen to the St. Louis Cardinals play baseball. And he painted such a picture in your mind that I had to get to Sportsman's Park at St. Louis and see a ball game, which I did. And I was never so disappointed in my life because he had put them on, the ball players, on such a pedestal. I had thought I was going to Athens to see the gods or something like that. Instead, it was just a baseball game. So I had to admit I was a little disappointed. But that's what you can do on radio.
Vin Scully is the greatest baseball announcer that I've ever heard. The two men who did the Giants on radio, Lon Simmons and Russ Hodges, great announcers. Russ made the classic call of Bobby Thompson's 1951 pennant-winning home run. And Lon Simmons had a great voice and was also the voice of the 49ers football. So those guys, in addition to a man by the name of Bill King, Bill was probably the most influential on me. He was the voice of the Oakland Raiders and the Golden State Warriors and then later the Oakland A's. But he was very descriptive. And the reason that I love Bill King, because he had a great vocabulary, he could speak rapidly but clearly, and he allowed you to visualize exactly what was transpiring on the field when you were listening on radio. And as a radio broadcaster, that really is your objective. In fact, it was Bill King who made the point that really I am the eyes of the audience. If I'm doing my job as a radio play-by-play man, I have to be the eyes of the listener. I have to allow them as they are driving in their car or listening in their kitchen. I have to be able to allow them to picture in their mind exactly what is happening at the game at that moment. Was it a high fly ball? Is it a tall player? Is it close to the foul line? Is it in the alley? What's the weather like? I mean, there are so many things that a good radio announcer has to constantly do. And Bill King, I think, is somebody that I really learned from at a very young age. Be descriptive, be detailed, and try to allow your listeners to imagine and visualize what is transpiring on the field at any given time.
That's the first pitch in the air, a foul pop. Dole dives, what a catch. Mike Lowe all the way past the fungo circle toward home plate, made a diving catch and had to contend with Veritek, who was there. Avoiding a collision, he made a full-length dive and grabbed it in midair for the out. What a play by Lowell. My favorite announcer growing up was Mal Allen, and he's the reason I became a broadcaster. I shouldn't admit this, but I did grow up a Yankee fan because they had more Italian players in those days, and my grandfather knew nothing about baseball, but he did know Joe DiMaggio. But Mel was really my hero because he just brought such a flair to the game, had the great pipes, the great voice, the great skills with the language, tremendous vocabulary. He could really make a game live, whether it was an exciting game or a dull game. And I remember used to root for rain delays to hear Mel tell stories. And to me, he's the greatest that ever lived.
Well, I grew up as a youngster when I discovered baseball, and I discovered broadcasting baseball. I was a youngster in Chicago, and listening to people like Jack Brickhouse and Lou Boudreau, who were then the play-by-play broadcasters for the Chicago Cubs. So I was greatly affected by them and the fact that they would televise just about every game in those days, a lot of television in Chicago for the Cubs. And of course, every game was on radio too. And as a youngster, I can recall sitting in my living room and turning down the volume actually on the television set and doing the play-by-play in my living room. That's I think I knew back then that this might be my future. So that's basically how I got started.
Well, Ernie Harwell. I worked with Ernie for a number of years, and was kind of my mentor, the great Hall of Famer. And I used to listen to him broadcast games when I was in Little League, and he broadcast my games when I played, and then I was his last on-air partner. So I'm very proud of that.
Ernie Harwell would be at the very top of any list. Ernie has been a mentor to me over the years. Whenever we faced situations where advice is needed, Ernie's always a shoulder you can lean on. Plus, he's a very good friend. He's a very strong Christian. He's a very giving gentleman. Tremendous with young people. I've seen him counsel and help more young broadcasters, and I learned a lesson from him. And I try to give back by teaching college courses because of the example that Ernie set in many ways. And even though he's retired, whenever we go to Detroit now, we try to pay a visit out to Ernie and visit with Ernie and Lulu at their home in the western suburbs of Detroit.
Great guy, yeah.
The person that Ernie Harwell is just, he's phenomenal, and he believed in the game was number one. The announcers were not important. They were just set the scene and do the game.
I've had two really great compliments in my entire career. One was from Ernie Harwell when I first broke in. I was in Minnesota doing the Minnesota Twins at a young age, and Ernie Harwell was there with the Detroit Tigers. And during the game, when I was doing the play-by-play for the Twins, obviously he was doing the play-by-play for the Detroit Tigers, but in the innings in which he wasn't broadcasting, he was kind of walking around, and our games were on the PA system at the ballpark there. And he sat there and listened to like almost one full inning of a game that I was doing for the Minnesota Twins. And I ran into him later during that same game, and he pulled me over, and I had already met him. So he came over to me and said, "Young man, you do a wonderful job." Now, that coming from Ernie Harwell, to me, meant a lot.
Right-hander against the right-hander. The outfield is straight up and deep on Fielder. He is the DH today. Swing, there's a drive to left. That one is long.
Well, the great Ernie Harwell has some of the great sayings of all time, and you know, like when a batter would strike out, he stood there like the house
by the side of the road, you know, and he's out for excessive window shopping when he took a third strike, you know. He looked at one too many and things like that. 2 for the price of 1 for a double play.
And he stood there like the house by the side of the road and watched it go by. Struck him out.
It just happened, and I began to do it, and then people reacted to it, and if they liked it, I kept on doing it.
Here's the pitch on the way. He swings and fouls it off. It'll reach the seats over back of the Tiger dugout, and the man from Walla Walla will
and I never felt like it was good as an announcer to contrive a call. I don't think it's good for a young announcer to sit down and say, "Hey, I'm going to work on this call. If it ever comes up, I'm going to say this and write it down. And
those are the things that I remember about Ernie, not only as a player or a little leaguer, listening to him, but being on the air with him at the same time.
I think style just comes naturally. My feeling has always been if you're going to broadcast baseball, you're going to be on the air every day and every night all summer long. And whatever you are, you are.
First rule is you're not bigger than the game. The game is the story.
Let the game excite the fans. And that's kind of why I'm not a screamer or hollerer. I think it's the game that really people want to hear. And I just try to describe like Ernie taught me. And you know, if it's a routine ground ball, I'm not going to scream, you know, there's a ground ball to short. You kind of do it where the game is the most important thing, and talk to the fans, never talk down to the fans, talk to the fans. And that's I try to just be me.
Some people like to be what are called homers. They root for the team they're broadcasting for. Other people like to play it down the middle. And I think a lot depends on your own personality and your disposition.
That's one of the cool things about this business. There is no one way to do it. You might get 10 broadcasters in a room and they might have 9 or 10 different opinions as to how to call a certain play.
And I decided early in my career that from my standpoint, I was going to be a reporter. And I wasn't going to say we and they and build up the home team. I was going to let the people listening do that instead of me. I thought it was their prerogative instead of mine, and that's the way I called it.
Most teams have guys sharing the play-by-play, where one guy works for a few innings, then he takes a break, and now another guy works. And when you're working solo, it's essential, I think, to have a little bit of dead air and to hear the roar or the buzz of the crowd, or a guy yelling out popcorn or cold beer.
Cold beer! Leave water! Coors Light! Mike's Hard Lemonade!
Ernest Hemingway said when he was writing, he learned early on, always remember the weather. The weather is something everyone can relate to. So every couple of innings or so, I try to remind people it's a very hot day here. The catcher's uniform is drenched with sweat. The umpire keeps going over to get a cold glass of water between innings. The players are really laboring in this heat here today.
It's very important to me to describe what kind of a day it is. For 22 and a half years, I did laboratory baseball for half the year because we were in the kingdom. No temperature change, no wind, no sun, false carpet. Get out on the road, you had a chance to explain it, describe the elements, the white fleecy clouds, ice blue sky like it is today, how green the grass is, which way the ball is going to go because of the wind.
I always try to give the score. Nothing is more annoying than to turn on the radio and not hear the score for 10 or 15 minutes. You might be pulling into the parking lot at the hardware store, and you have to hear the score before you get out. You want the score immediately, so I try to give the score after every single batter if I can.
I believe the announcer has to give a little recap now and then. He has to say, well, the score now, the Yankees are leading the Tigers 5-4. The Tigers scored first on a 3-run home run by Cash, and then the Yankees came back and tied it, and then so forth and so on until he brings you up to date in about 15 seconds. And then you say, now we've got this situation where the Tigers seem to be coming back, and the Yankees are going to try to hold them off, that type of thing. I think that's the only way to do it, because if you just let the listener come in cold and don't say anything, he's pretty much at a loss of what's going on.
2 balls, 2 strikes, 2 out, bases loaded in the 9th, Cubs leading 5-4. Don't you wish you were here? The pitch. He struck him out. Holy cow. Cubs win. Cubs win. Look at that picture of ecstasy on the field.
I started preparing 27, 28 years ago when I first got into broadcasting in Major League Baseball with the San Francisco Giants back in 1977. So I think I started then, and I've been doing homework ever since. Every day you're doing homework. I come out to the ballpark and I might get into a conversation with a couple of the coaches. You go to the clubhouse, you hang around the batting cage. You might be on the computer earlier in the day, you know, gathering information. So you're doing homework all the time. When you're in baseball, it's a total involvement. It's not just about showing up at the ballpark and broadcasting a game that takes maybe 2.5 hours, you know. You're doing homework constantly. From the minute you get up in the morning until the end of the game, even after the game you're doing it, because you get together and you talk to people about the game again. So for me, it's a 6th, 7th month process throughout the regular season where you basically never stop doing homework and preparing for the game.
You spend a lifetime preparing for baseball. Baseball is a game of, it's like a pyramid. You're building blocks. One day builds on the next. 1 week builds on what happened last week. A month builds on what happened the month before. A season is a direct result of what happened the season before, and that's the way baseball works. So I think you prepare constantly. I think it starts as a kid. You read as much as you can about the history of the game, because baseball history and tradition is so important.
There are so many factors that go into being a good announcer, and I think the better an announcer is, the easier he makes it sound. Vin Scully sounds like he's sitting in a rocking chair broadcasting a ball game for the Dodgers. He makes it sound so easy, but that's why he is so great. It's not an easy job. I can't speak for anybody else, but I know that for me, I have to concentrate, I have to prepare, I have to bear down and really focus and try to stay focused every single minute, because it's so easy to make mistakes. There's no script in front of you. You are speaking extemporaneously. You are reacting to what you see, and you are trying to quickly put that into words and make them clearly understood by the audience.
It's a game of reaction. The guy throws a ball, somebody hits it, and you react to it just like a player reacts to a ball hit to him, and he's going to glove it and throw it over to first base for the out. So that's what makes it fun, and there's no script, and nobody knows what's going to happen. It's really reality on the radio.
That's right. There are many qualities for especially a radio announcer that never go out of style. If you have a good voice, and you're knowledgeable, and you're pleasant, and you have a smooth delivery, and you have a sense of humor, and you're accurate, if you were good 20 years ago or today, if you have those qualities, you could still be good 20 years from now. I honestly believe that. There are a lot of timeless qualities for broadcasters.
Fly ball deep left center. Back are Pierre and Merton near the wall. That is another home run. Marlon Anderson cracking a homer to left center.
Probably the most difficult play to describe is a rundown where somebody's caught in the hot box, as it were, in the pickle, and you try to keep up with the throws if there are a lot of throws. It's a game of starts and stops, of sudden bursts. So probably the hardest thing is you have to time your stories and your background information between pitches and not let it interfere when there is action. There's so very little action in the course of that game.
The toughest play day in and day out for a baseball announcer is a home run call, because you want to be excited and you want to get it right. You don't want to be too hasty about it, but you want to give it enough oomph where it is exciting.
The inside the park home run, because or the triple, or triple play, which can catch you off guard. If you don't pay attention, you can get caught up and hey, was it really a triple play? And all of a sudden, yeah, there it is. It was a triple play. But I don't know. I guess rundowns and things like that, where you might miss and that has happened, where you might miss a runner passing another runner who's automatically out, and all of a sudden chaos breaks out. And you say, what happened there? I've been caught.
I said there's a long fly, there's a fly ball to left field, and it's going, it's a home run. And as a matter of fact, I had a tape of it, and I gave it to Bucky Dent. And I said, Bucky, I want to apologize to you. You know, the way I called it, it started out like a fly ball. And he said, well, that's what it was. You're right.
That's right. I think the most fun call in baseball would be maybe a triple. A triple where a guy has to slide in to beat the throw or the tag at third base. I think that might be the most fun because it's so descriptive. There's a lot going on. You know, where's the ball hit? Or what kind of a bounce did it take? Who's going after the ball? Did it take a bad carom off the corner wall or something? You know, did the outfielder overplay the ball? Did he overrun the ball? All these things are going on, and they're going on real fast. At the same time, you got to keep an eye on the base runner. Maybe he slipped. Maybe he tripped, rounding first base. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that can happen during a triple. And I think if you can describe a triple accurately and with excitement, and make the call before you hear the crowd react to it, I think that might be the most rewarding.
We had instances at the Polo Grounds when I worked with the Giants. The foul lines were something like 257 and 278 down there, and the ball would be hit to right field, for instance, and the announcer would say, well, the second baseman's going back. Oh, it's in the seats, it's a home run.
Surprised Ernie Harwell.
So a lot of them, a lot of it depends on the structure of the ballpark.
Pitches from a pitcher, the grip on the ball, I think that's the most difficult for me to describe because I talk about movement on the ball a lot. Movement and an important late movement is, well, why did the ball sink and tail? So I have to try to describe the release of the fingers, and that's a little bit difficult because I certainly can't show the release, how you grip the ball. But to me, that's the toughest thing because I think pitching, it's all about pitching in baseball. Pitching and defense were a great example of that this year.
Here's the 3-1 on the way now. Swing and a miss. And he came after him with mustard that time, 93 miles an hour. So now the runners will be taking off.
Great Ernie Harwell always said there's nothing new at there's nothing new in baseball really. I mean, the pitches used to be called a drop. That was it's a curveball straight down, and an upshoot, is a riding fastball. So it's basically the same. It's just different terminology.
The game has not changed very much. Other than the designated hitter rule, there hasn't been a significant rule change since 1893 when they moved the pitching mound back to 60 feet 6 inches. The greatest change in broadcasting has been the wealth of information we have provided by the internet. We have so much information now that it's not as hard to find information. It's a matter of being a better editor and not getting too carried away. You can overwhelm people with numbers and statistics. You have to find a proper mix. My theory has always been use a number to tell a story. And if there's a question between an anecdote or a number, you use the anecdote.
I guess I've done about 3,500, close to 4,000 big league ball games in my career. It's a lot of games. You know that not every one of them is going to be exactly what you want it to be. You try to get everything as close to accurate and as close to entertaining as you possibly can. But you feel like there's always more you can do. You could always use a better vocabulary. You could be more descriptive. You could be funnier.
If you're talking to maybe somebody who's lived in America only a couple of years, he's learning the language. A lot of people really learn their language from radio and TV. That's right. Or you might be talking to an English professor who's going to be worried about what tense you're using or all the other problems with grammar. Or you're talking to somebody who knows absolutely nothing about baseball, but on the other hand, you're talking to a guy who played in the major leagues. He's listening to you. You're talking to a housewife who wants to learn baseball. You're talking to youngsters.
Good radio play-by-play man, if he's really doing his job, represents the eyes of the audience. You have to allow them to be able to see in their mind, whether they are visually impaired or not. Where is the ball? Who's got the ball? What's the score? What's the weather like? What's the crowd like? What does the sky look like? What color are the uniforms? What color is the field? Let them see, let them feel what is happening at the game every single moment. You are the eyes and sometimes the ears of the audience as a broadcaster, so let them feel it.
Set the pitch, he swings, bounding ball, stopped by Truby, throw to second, one, relay to first, two for the price of one for the Tigers. A great play by Truby to end the...
A lot of times people sort of let their personality run away from themselves, and it's like Shakespeare said, the play's a thing. I think the game's a thing. People don't really tune in to hear an announcer. I don't care who does the games, real fans going to listen to his team. He might not like the announcer, but he's going to tune in, and the main thing he wants, basically, is a report on the game. Who's winning, who's losing, and what the score is.
The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, and a breaking ball dropped by the catcher. Finally finds a handle and throws to first base. Vance Wilson dropped it twice, then finally picked it up and threw out Rivera.
We're very portable. That's why baseball's a radio game. The pace of the game lends itself better to radio than it does to TV. The coverage lends itself better to radio because it's a big area and a small ball. And that little white thing's only in play 8 minutes out of 3 hours.
Baseball and radio is such a great match made in heaven, as I call it, because you can imagine where the players are, and if there was a base hit down the left field line, immediately, if you're listening on radio, you can picture that in your mind where the left field line is.
I think baseball is unique in that regard because baseball is very linear. Most of us have played the game, so we can picture where right field is, or where first base, or where shortstop is. If you've played any baseball at any level, if you say shortstop, you immediately know right where that is on a diamond between second and third. Center field, the left field foul pole, the backstop, the area right behind the catcher.
We think people who listen to the games on radio see the game on radio.
If somebody put a gun to your head and said you can only do one or the other, radio or television, it'd be radio by far.
Style on radio and TV for the announcer is very different. Now things have changed over the years. When I first started, you did TV pretty much by yourself. And you were really somebody who was putting captions, vocal captions, on a picture. And over the years, TV has added the analyst, which makes it entirely different now. And I really believe on TV that the analyst is the star of the show, because the way I did TV when I did it in my later years, I just did the pretty much straight play-by-play, and then let the analyst come in and do the recapping, and the people would get from the diamond kind of a perspective from the ball player who played ball and had become the analyst. But in the old days, the TV was just the radio with radio with a picture on it.
And consequently, if you're broadcasting, you have to be able to fill up the airtime. You can tell stories, you can get into the individual players, whatever. The thing about radio, too, as opposed to television play-by-play in baseball, is that in radio, all you do is turn on the microphone, and then you can take that broadcast wherever you want to take it. Whereas in television, it's basically a director's medium, and you have to talk about what's on the television screen. Otherwise, people watching at home, they're not going to be with you. So you have to kind of adhere to what the director wants in television, whereas the radio, you can go wherever you want to.
In radio, it's an announcer's medium. TV is an analyst medium and a director's medium and a producer's medium. Radio is a broadcaster's medium. We have no one in our headsets telling us what to do. The action is there. We try to paint the picture on the canvas, a blank canvas, and we paint the picture. Fortunately, we have very skilled athletes performing for us, so that is our painting, as it were. In TV, you react. TV, you have to fill in the blanks, but sometimes you let the picture and the sound dictate, because you can't fill every minute, then you're talking too much and interfering with people. So you really try to paint the picture on radio and on TV. The camera does that pretty much, and you sort of do more analysis and fill in the blanks.
I think if you talk to any play-by-play man, certainly you can probably make more money in television in a lot of cases, but radio is much more enjoyable. On radio, the announcer is the show. Nothing happens until the broadcaster speaks. On television, on the other hand, it's more of a director and a producer's medium, where they get replays, and they have gadgetry, and they have pictures of blimps and pictures of little girls eating cotton candy and whatever. That's more of a medium for a director. But on radio, the broadcaster is really the whole show. So maybe this is my vanity speaking more than anything else.
I would forget when I would go over to television that I just come from radio, and I basically do a radio play-by-play. Television, you can see what's happening. So I really tone it down. I let the picture take care of itself. I let my color guy basically run the show. All I do is, point out the plays, call play-by-play, but not every pitch. They see the pitch coming there. Radio, they don't see the pitch. They don't know if it's a breaking ball, fastball, changeup, screwball, curveball, whatever they're throwing. Television, they do. So you don't have to describe that. It's a huge difference.
Put your hands together!
Well, my perception of our audience is that it's very wide-ranging.
I think any performer, any broadcaster, singer, artist of any kind wants to have an audience. It's part of your vanity, I suppose.
We know we have young people who are in and out, depending on what they're doing. They may be shopping, they may be in and out of the car, they may be at the beach. We also have to think, and advertising agencies give no credit, and most broadcasters don't either, to the elderly and to the shut-ins, including the blind. We hear quite a bit from blind fans during the course of the season, and we have blind people that come to games and visit with us.
One of the great things that a broadcaster receives are fan letters. And when you receive a fan letter from a visually handicapped or a visually impaired fan, it means so much to you. It almost brings tears to your eyes, because in this day of television, being a radio broadcaster is somewhat anachronistic. And yet, knowing in your audience that there are blind fans who rely on you for their baseball entertainment.
I have some really good friends of mine that are big baseball fans, and so I try to picture one of them as the guy that I'm talking to, a knowledgeable person who loves the game and who wants to listen to the game and wants to be informed. So I try to picture them when I do my broadcast. I try to broadcast to that one person, and I figure if you can reach one person, then you're reaching everyone who's listening. So that's the approach I try to take.
From time to time, I get mail from blind people saying how much they can see the game, through my eyes. And that, to me, is the biggest compliment that any broadcaster can get, is when somebody who can't see the game can see the game through your eyes.
I think all announcers get a good bit of mail from blind people because they have such a love for baseball and radio. It's the way that we can reach them, and they're very acute about it, and they're very knowledgeable fans too, more so than people who have sight, I think, because the sighted people depend on a lot of other things other than just listening. So it means a lot to all the announcers, I think, that they can reach these blind people, and we find out that they have a great love for baseball.
Baseball is the clear, cool eyes of Rogers Hornsby, the flashing spikes of a Ty Cobb, and an overaged pixie named Rabbit Moranville. Baseball, just a game, as simple as a ball and bat, and yet as complex as the American spirit it symbolizes. It's a sport, a business, sometimes almost even religion. Why, the fairy tale of Willie Mays making a brilliant World Series catch and then dashing off to play stickball in the streets with his teenage pals. That's baseball.
My friend Craig Lynch. Craig is a blind fan and a reporter, and he goes to every game at Wrigley Field.
My name is Craig Lynch. I'm from Chicago, Illinois.
At the ballpark, there's a public address system, which allows the fans to know who's batting. It's the voice that you hear over the whole stadium. There is also a press box announcer.
In this press box itself, there's like a microphone, and they'll come in with any changes.
Letting the media members know about pitching changes, pinch hitters, the attendance, trades that might have taken place. So that announcement is for the media members only.
They're about 30 feet away from where we sit. And so sometimes with headsets on and they're talking and getting ready for the coming out of a commercial break, they may not hear all the changes that were made.
Now Craig, when he is listening to a game or watching a game, he is listening to my radio broadcast, and he's also listening to the press box announcement.
I remember listening to the radio, and I would realize they don't know that so and so is into the ball game as a pinch hitter or as a replacement. So I just would walk over and tell them.
Now, there was a game a few years ago. The Cubs are playing the Pirates. The Pirates changed left fielders. I didn't know about it. So I kept on saying, for example, Davis in left field. Davis makes the catch. Davis throws to second base, whatever. At the end of the half inning, Craig Lynch comes into our booth, bless his heart, I love him. And he says, Pat, Davis is no longer in left field. That's Smith in left field. You might want to make the change on your broadcast. And I said, well, thank you, Craig. I appreciate that very much. And he left, and the engineer then said to me, and he was laughing, he says, Pat, you're supposed to be a big league announcer. When a blind man has to come in and tell you about the changes, you're having a bad day.
Tickets, guys.
I was in my office at Tiger Stadium one afternoon, and I got a phone call. And the fellow said, I'm Paul Paravano, and I live in Boston, and I'm a great Tiger fan, and I've listened to you from time to time. I've put up with you here and there, and I would like to meet you, and you're coming to Boston, and could you come out, and maybe we'll have a little cookout at my place, and would that be okay? And I said, sure, why not? I'd love to meet you. Is that about right or not?
You know, you still belong on the air. That is almost verbatim what happened. That is exactly what happened.
Sometimes you get to August or July or August and you've done 100 games and it's 95 degrees and sweltering humidity and your ball club is 25 games out of first place and you try to attach some meaning to every single game. If I think of blind fans listening in the audience, that gives me an immediate lift and it motivates me to do my very best every single day. And for them to write to you and take the time or have somebody else write you a letter for them, and for them to say, thank you for allowing me to listen to Cubs games, I can picture what's happening thanks to you, you're very descriptive, that means everything. That means everything to me. If a blind fan is able to enjoy the game because of what I'm doing, I feel great.
The greatest compliment I think I ever received was from a retired priest, a great baseball historian named Monsignor John Dillon Day, who is a baseball historian and a Boston College historian. And he told me, he said, what you have is an apostolate because you bring joy and information and entertainment to the elderly and to the shut-ins. And I never thought of it that way, but that is a key part of our audience, whether they're recognized in terms of their buying power by sponsors or not, that we really owe a best performance to those people because we are their life.
The other compliment I got, and I'm sure other broadcasters have gone through the same thing, but it was a blind person, a blind baseball fan. He paid me a great compliment. He told me that he was actually able to see the game by listening to my broadcast. And I took that to heart because basically that's what I'm doing. Anybody who's listening to the game on radio, they can't see the game. I mean, they're all blind. They can't see the game. And for someone to tell me that meant a lot to me. You know, in fact, I was doing my job. I was painting the picture on the radio. And for someone to be able to see the game on the radio, in fact, I started saying that after a while. After I got that compliment, I began to say occasionally, I'll see you on the radio. And it meant a lot.
They told me, they gave the One World Award to me for exactly what I was just talking about, that the blind, they could see the game, you know, through my eyes and things like that. And to me, I've received several awards, and that is as important as any other award, knowing I think that you have accomplished your mission. You have done your job. You have let people that don't see.
The great Jack Buck, the voice of the Cardinals, went into the Hall of Fame, I believe, about 1987. And during his Hall of Fame speech, he said something like, when I'm broadcasting on the radio, I try to remember people that can't come out to the game, people who are in hospitals or in rest homes or blind people. And he said, after all these years, I realized that my broadcast energy comes from the people at the other end. And I like that. He said, my energy comes from the people at the other end. And I thought that was a great way to put it. Knowing that blind people and people in hospitals and people in prisons and people in homes, who can't ever come out to the ballpark, but that was a great way of putting it, that his energy came from those folks at the other end. I love that.
Pittsburgh has won! Pittsburgh won this ball game! 2-0, it's over! Pittsburgh has just beat the Reds 2-0. The National League race is in a tie. Holy cow! Never has it been a more thrilling moment. Within 15 seconds after the Cardinals won, Mazeroski threw out Ruiz, and the Pirates...
Well, there's so many great plays, you know, that an announcer is confronted with during his career.
Oh, the last out of the World Series is probably the most memorable play we've had. It was a simple ground ball to the pitcher. And I was glad it happened that way because you didn't want a check swing. We have to wait for an umpire's appeal to be recognized. You wanted it to be instantaneous. That was certainly a great play. I thought it was really neat when John Sterling came over and congratulated us after the Johnny Damon Grand Slam against the Yankees in the 7th game of the 04 playoffs. Even though he's on the other side now, it's a memorable moment that we will always have. There have been some weird plays too, but I think that the last out of the World Series has to be at the top of the list because of what it signified and the joy it brought to New England.
Walk-off home runs that beat you, like we just had at Fenway Park in Boston recently. Mark Loretta hits a 2-run home run in the bottom half of the 9th inning into the upper deck, and you've got a 5,000-mile flight home, and you've lost a ball game that just tears your heart out. And a festive occasion for 5.5 hours becomes like a funeral dirge, and nobody's talking to anybody. It's happened many, many times, but on the other hand, if you hit that walk-off home run, that's wonderful.
In Minneapolis, Minnesota Twins, Dave Kingman was the hitter. I think he was playing for the Oakland A's at the time. And Dave Kingman had this reputation of hitting these major league pop. Nobody could hit a pop-up like Dave Kingman. When he hit them, they went up there forever, and they stayed up there forever. And we're playing a baseball game indoors, and Kingman hits a pop-up, and it goes straight up in the air. Now, the booth in Minneapolis at the Metrodome, once the ball gets up to a certain height, you can't see it. So then you have to depend on the fielders to tell you where the ball is. And once that ball got up there, I'm looking, I can't see it. I looked down to the field immediately, and I was looking for help. And Kent Herbeck was playing first base, and Steve Lombardozzi was playing second base. Tim Lauda was catching. Frank Viola was pitching. Kingman hits the ball straight up in the air, and they're looking up, and people are gathering over by first base, but the ball's not coming down. And they keep looking up, and they're waiting for the ball to come down. Pretty soon, Mickey Hatcher was also there. And in fact, Mickey Hatcher was playing first base. And he's looking, and all of a sudden, he starts covering up because he doesn't know where the ball's going. He's going to get hit in the head or something, so the ball never comes down. The ball never came down. As it turns out, in the Metrodome, it has a false ceiling. And the roof is kept up in the Metrodome with air pressure. And they have these little ventilation holes that the pressure goes through, and that's what keeps the roof up. The ball and the hole could be bigger than this. Not much bigger than the baseball. While the ball somehow got up into the roof, it went right through one of those little holes, and it lodged itself, in the roof, and the ball never came down. So, what do you do? And I'm sitting there doing the play-by-play, and I'm trying to describe what I'm seeing, and I don't know what I'm seeing because, that had never happened before. So maybe that might have been the toughest and the most unusual. And the umpires got together, and they didn't have a ground rule for that, so they said, well, let's give the guy a double. So they gave him a double, and the next day the Twins had this big promotion, what goes up has to come down. So they sent somebody up there, and they actually dropped the ball. Mickey Hatcher volunteered to catch it, and the ball on the way down is knuckling all over the place. So he starts dancing all over the place, trying to get under it, and missed the ball. The ball hits him on the foot, bounds away, and Hatcher starts limping away. And it was a very comical scene, but that was the end result of maybe the most unusual play I've ever seen.
And '68 was a great time for us. We won the World Championship, and '67 there were some problems with the cities in our country, some riots and so forth. So to play on that team in '68, where we gave everybody, a chance to come together and root for something together and take their minds off some of the other problems, that's the thing I'm most proud of. And the fans of the Detroit Tigers, the way they've treated me, and I was able to come through with some pinch hits and extra innings and so forth to win ball games. And those are the things that you remember the most. And of course, winning the World Championship and saying it's because of the great fans is the reason we were able to win that.
Game 7 of the 1997 World Series, because I think every broadcaster, if you're going to get into the business, you want to do a baseball broadcast. You want to do a Game 7 in the World Series. And I was lucky enough to do that with the Florida Marlins in 1997 when the Marlins beat the Cleveland Indians in a 7-game extra innings. Edgar Renteria gets the game-winning hit, to end the World Series and became world champion. So, and I happened to be broadcasting at that time, and to me it was maybe my greatest thrill.
Having done, I don't know, count them up, well over 4,000 games for the Mariners, still my biggest thrill. I've done no-hitters, Randy Johnson's no-hitters, Chris Bosio's no-hitters. I had the opportunity, for a long time to describe Ken Griffey Jr.'s exploits. Chris Bosio's no-hitter, he had one too. But still my greatest thrill was opening night 1977 against the Angels. I came up here from the Angels. I had previously been with the Angels. Mark Langston shut us out in the first game. Nolan Ryan shut us out in the second game. And not only began to wonder if we were going to win a game that year, but score a run that year. And lo and behold, we finally won the third game of what was a 5-game series, but still to this day, because of the impact of coming back and reintroducing Major League Baseball after one really year that left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, 1969 with the Seattle Pilots. That was a great thrill.
I remember the 20 strikeout games of Roger Clemens, particularly in terms of individual performances, because they were so unlikely. The first 20 strikeout game, a cold April night, misty night in 1986, April 29th to be exact. Many of the Boston media members were over covering the Celtics and the Lakers at the old Garden in the playoffs. We had a crowd of about 14,000, and right away you knew something special was happening because the Seattle Mariners weren't even hitting foul balls. They were just swinging and missing. And that was the night Roger struck out 20 for the first time, and then 10 years later, in a meaningless game in most aspects in Detroit, both teams pretty much out of the race, a bad Tiger team and rather mediocre Red Sox team. September 18th on a cold night with probably less than 10,000 people in the stands, Roger Clemens struck out 20 again.
One of the most famous baseball plays in the history of the game, I was on NBC TV when it happened. Bobby Thompson's famous shot heard around the world, October the 3rd, 1951. And that was a wonderful experience for me. My partner Russ Hodges and I alternated on the giant broadcast. It was my turn on television for the final playoff game of the 3 games between the Dodgers and the Giants at the Polo Grounds. And I thought, well, boy, I've got a great assignment here. Poor old Russ, he's going to be on the radio. There are 5 different radio broadcasts, and his voice is going to get lost. I'm going to be on NBC TV all by myself, coast to coast. And, well, I can't help it, And Bobby Thompson hits a home run, and the guy records Russ Hodges saying the Giants win the pennant 5 times. And our sponsor issues it as a record. It becomes the most famous sports broadcast of all time. And on TV, we didn't have any replays. We didn't have any recording at all of what happened on TV, and my wife Lulu and I are the only people that know I was on that afternoon. But it was a great thrill for me, and I thought Russ did a tremendous job with his call of the Bobby Thompson home run.
It sounds corny, but I think really probably just getting to the big leagues and being able to make a living, and that first time that you are actually a big league announcer. I was 27 years old in Minnesota doing the television for the Twins, and I'll never forget the first game I did. The Twins lost. They got clobbered by the Detroit Tigers, something like 11-3. But just the thrill of being in the booth and knowing that you are a big league announcer, and it's such a novelty and such a unique job. You never know how long you're going to last, but just getting there, just doing a big league game for the first time was perhaps the most memorable. And I've been very lucky in my career. I've covered Hall of Famers Robin Yount and Paul Molitor in Milwaukee. I saw Sammy Sosa have some wonderful slugging years in the late 90s and the early part of this century. I've seen pennant races. I've seen the Cubs in the playoffs. So I've done some memorable games, but I think just getting to the big leagues and being a big league baseball announcer was the thrill that I'll never forget.
This ball game is over.
For lo, the winter's past, the rain is over and gone, the flowers appear on the earth, the time of the singing of birds is come, and the voice of the turtle is heard in our land. Happy New Year, everybody.
I look back on 45 years of broadcasting the thrills of the wonderful game of baseball, which we all love so passionately. And then I think of the fan, and perhaps that's who I represent here today. You, the fan. We are all fans of the world's greatest game, baseball. And I know that it is the fans who are responsible for my being here. I've always tried in each and every broadcast to serve the fans to the best of my ability. In my mind, they are the unsung heroes of our great game. The baseball players come and go, but the game goes on forever. The players, the writers, the broadcasters, no matter how great, all are temporary actors on the stage. It's the game. It's baseball that moves ahead, reaching new heights all the time, generation after generation. And I'm very, very proud of being some part of this important piece of Americana.